Good evening, mi gente. This is Ray Collazo, and you're watching and listening to the Founded Translation Bomba Live crossover edition. This is Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us on the 401st edition of Founded Translation. That makes me sound much older than I actually am. But we got to give you what you want, especially during this campaign season. There's so much going on, and not only do we have to provide you accurate information and at times hold our own community accountable, we have to also celebrate people in our community, particularly in the arts, that are overcoming this hostile climate to really elevate our voices in a way that really shows everything that we are and challenges a lot of ugly history that weighs us down. So later on the show, we're gonna be joined by a great friend to the show, Zulma Arzu Brown, and the cast of Dike, an incredible web series that tackles several sensitive topics within the Latinx community. But first, we got to break down what's going on with the news this week, and who better than the founder and executive co-founder of the radio version of the program and a fantastic leader in her own right, Vanessa Maria Graber. Guess who's back again?
Hola,
tell a friend.
What's
going on, Vanessa?
Hey, glad to be there. Saludos to our live audience on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as our podcast audience on iTunes, Spotify, all the digital platforms. The show is everywhere. And of course, a very special shout out to all of our radio listeners on WPPM, that stands for People Powered Media, on 106.5 FM in Philly, and in Camden, People Powered Media. I'm so thrilled that the show has expanded to all the platforms. You've had all these great guests, all these amazing topics. So I'm happy to be.
You're just happy that I keep giving love to our freestyle heads, like Richie Rich and Betty D. I know you're enjoying the freestyle content. I'll tell you that Richie Rich has quite a following, that guy. I mean, they are.
You have quite the network. You bring smart Latinos on here. I always say it. People with lots of different points of views, showcasing our diversity. So I'm here to give my, radical 2 cents as well.
Oh, yes. No question. And part of the reason Vanessa's not on more because he's out here doing the work. We're going to talk a little bit about that again later on the show. We're going to meet with the cast. We're going to have a great conversation with the cast of Dike, new web series, which is the brainchild of a great friend to the show, Zulma Arzu Brown. Much respect to our Hondureños out there, our Catrachos. So we always got to represent for all diversity in our community, especially our Central American family. And also later in the show, a little bit, me and Vanessa are going to have to do a little spanking, do a little accountability, because we have a few people in our community doing this right. And we got to be straight up about it, and we got to hold ourselves accountable because, letting things go and being nice is only going to cause our community more harm. And so that's why we have to be hold our folks accountable, even people that sometimes we like and it's uncomfortable to call out. We got to do the right thing. But first of all, before I ask Vanessa, from an electoral perspective, is knee deep in Pennsylvania activism to get out the Latino vote and give people accurate information about this new, somewhat complicated voting process, but it also gives us more options. I wanted to give folks just sort of my general state of the race. So many of us live in fear. And I get these texts from friends, family, a lot of, DMs. Hey, Ray, what's going to happen? Are the polls right? Are they going to steal this? Are we really going to win? I'm so scared. And let me tell you something. I think the polling that we're seeing, and of course, nobody believes that's 100% accurate. But the fact that we're in this position electorally, I think we should all understand that didn't just happen because Trump's a bad person or Biden's a fantastic candidate. It happened because not only the work that's happened this year to engage communities like Vanessa does, that oftentimes don't get the preferred candidate they want in these cycles, or rarely do, frankly, but they persist to come on to continue to build the movement. But this is also, and I'm thinking about places like Arizona and even in Florida, we're talking about decades plus activism that's led us to this moment where we can feel like we have a very strong opportunity to win this election. And, can it be stolen? Can this guy pull a Putin? Can Bill Barr? Yeah, all those things are possible, and we have to be prepared for all those contingencies. And I know Vanessa's thinking about all those contingencies and is a great thinker about those kind of community outreach strategies. But at the end of the day, I want people to understand, I don't want people in the next 2.5 weeks of their life living in fear. I want you to live in empowerment, because think about what we've done to get us to this point where this is possible. In the beginning of this calendar year, let's be honest about it. Most people didn't think he wasn't going to get reelected. And that's what all my friends told me. And look, we're on the precipice of the light that we've been searching for, a great relief of stress, not the panacea, not back, an ideal situation, but something, a political environment and a democracy we can continue to fight for. So, Vanessa, I want to go to you because your thoughts just sort of generally about the race at this point in race is, because the Senate's also a major part of this. But I just want to get your perspective because with Philly Boricuas and your activism, you're talking to not only Latinos, but people that are traditionally very disenfranchised from the process about the importance of registering to vote. And in Pennsylvania, you still have a few days to do that. It's very important. Registering to vote and sort of maneuvering these voting options, whether it's vote by mail, election day, that sort of hybrid piece with the voting centers. So just want to get your thoughts about the race and also your reflections. You're on the street, girl. You're talking to people on the street, in the hood, and you're having these real conversations that most of us, frankly, don't have the courage to have. And you're hearing a lot of good feedback. So tell us what you're hearing in our community about this race at this point.
So the first thing that I want to say is don't just vote, right? Like our get out the vote that we're doing now is one of many tactics that we use to make change. So I'm not in the camp that we're just telling people to vote and that's it. This is part of a wider strategy to engage the community, listen to them, find out what their needs and their issues are, what they're concerned about, what their biggest questions are, and then try to formulate a bigger strategy on how to address those concerns, advocate on their behalf, and involve them in the process of building a movement and making change. So voting is just one element to that. The reality is that people need to get educated. They need to learn certain things. Learning is lifelong, we believe. We're always learning, we're always reading and trying to understand what's going on in our world. The second thing is people need to get active in their communities, right? Like we can't just go to the ballot box and that's it. Like people need to, talk more with their neighbors. They need to volunteer. People need to make personal sacrifices if they wish to see reform and change. And then the last part is like the advocacy and mobilization and organizing element to it, right? Like what we're trying to do is build a base of people that want to fight back. And the truth is that I am scared. I really am. I have fear, just like everybody else. But I use that fear to fuel my activism, right? Like that is the gasoline that makes me go out and do this work because I'm afraid what will happen if we don't win, if we just give up, if we don't fight back. And so that fear is what a lot of people are feeling. And we need to really empathize with people, especially people who are most affected by income inequality, by COVID-19, by lack of health care. So, we're out on the streets in North Philly because one, North Philly is where our people are in Philly, right? Like Puerto Ricans specifically. I mean, there's Latinos everywhere, but the heart of Puerto Rican community is in North Philly. So we've been focusing on the Fair Hill community, Kensington, Juniata, like that area. There's not a lot of us. We're volunteers. And we've also seen that there's been a real neglect of those communities in terms of political engagement. So when we go out there, we've been tabling, we've been doing events, we've been partnering with a lot of people and doing food distribution and park cleanups and all kinds of stuff, giving out masks, giving out hand sanitizer. We're asking people, one, like, how are you doing? Like, how are things?
That's right.
Like what's going on in the neighborhood? And what are your questions? We're here to, again, my background as a journalist. The work that I'm doing now is about trying to get journalists to provide people the information they need to survive.
And Vanessa, what's the biggest issue you're hearing with people in North Philly about issues that they're concerned about outside the election, just things affecting their daily life?
I think everybody is concerned about COVID-19.
Rona is real.
Right. Yeah. People are scared about what's happening with that. And the thing is that there's like two kind of like sets of people, right? There's people that are much harder to engage on a political level because their basic needs aren't being met. Like when they see the food, they want the food and they'll say, what do I have to do for the box of food? I will say, you don't have to do anything, but they're ready to sign up and do whatever.
Yeah.
And we're just like,
But
no,
they're
no, no,
appreciative
no.
too, and they're
Yeah, but it just shows like the desperation. Like people they don't have enough to eat. That is a big problem. People don't have food in Philadelphia. And I can't speak to other cities, but I'm pretty sure that hunger is a thing that is happening everywhere.
it's huge, huge.
And
You see relatively nice cars at food pantries all over big city America, and food insecurity we don't really talk about it that much in that context, but we have a hunger problem in this country, period, which disproportionately impacts people of color, and COVID-19 has just exacerbated that.
absolutely. And our people, some of them, they're like really like humilde, right? They come up, they're almost like,
It's embarrassing.
how do you say, like sebochornan, right? Like they kind of are like, is it okay if I take the food, and and they're always thinking of others. Can I take a box for my neighbor? Can I take a box for my abuela? So that's the number one thing. It's not the thing that you're complaining about, but it's the thing that we're observing, right? Like people don't have enough food, fresh foods, healthy foods. The second thing is that, people don't have housing. There's a lot of homeless people in North Philly. A lot of people lack access to affordable housing. That is a much wider discussion, because we know a big part of Kensington, for example, is being gentrified. There's all this development there. At the same time, there's a big problem with crime and violence stemming from the drug war, right? We have open air drug markets happening. And then at the same time, those communities are also being over policed, right? So people who are disengaged from the political process, who are experiencing all of those things, they ask us, well, what's going to change, from Biden to Trump? Because under Obama, not
It's
a
a
whole
fair
lot.
question.
Right. They say under Obama, not a whole lot changed. Under Trump, not a whole lot changed. So that's the most difficult thing to communicate to people, right? Is, how they're going to see the change in their own neighborhoods. So I don't start with the presidential election because it doesn't really affect people, at least not to them. We start from the very basics. Hey, well, did you know one of the ballot questions in Philly is to end the stop and frisk program? You see this police around right now, they can currently stop you. And they go, oh, yeah, we don't like that. I said, oh, the second question is about creating an office of victim advocacy. The third question is about creating a citizens police advisory union. And the city wants to take out loans, for capital projects, for parks and schools and public transit. And those are the things that people can relate to. And they go like, oh, okay, now I'm listening. Right. And then you say, okay, like there's some candidates running. Here's what's going on with candidates. So we kind of build up to Trump and Biden. And one of the things I think that's really resonated for people is, that Joe Biden has a pretty detailed plan, in comparison to Trump, for Puerto Rico. And so many of us in the diaspora have family in Puerto Rico that we talk to regularly, and that concerns us. So we'll say, oh, did you know Biden has a plan for Puerto Rico? And they go, oh, no, I didn't know that. I said, and we're nonpartisan. We're not telling people who to vote. But we say, you should research that. You should check it out. Just Google Joe Biden and Puerto Rico plan and read about it. And then that's a thing I think that gets people thinking like, oh, okay. So in doing the voter outreach, like we don't really have any training. We're making it up as we go along. But it's about building relationships with people, having conversations with them, finding out what they need, and, building up to like the reasons why they should participate. We also try to emphasize it doesn't take a lot of time. Your vote is safe. We can help you with the questions if you don't understand them. Just trying to make it easy for people because they're making it really complicated, especially with the mail-in ballots and the confusion around in-person voting. So people's other questions are really wild. I mean, a ton of people have said, can we still vote in person at the polls on election day? And we say like, yeah, you can.
Basic information is the most important weapon you can give people. Just having that information. That's right.
What's cool about being like a grassroots, nonpartisan group is we don't have quotas to fill, right? Like we're not really using anybody's money either. Like we're doing this a lot of it out of our own.
I know
It's
I try to get your money, you don't want it.
I mean, like I said, it's more community engagement work than anything, right? Because we're just able to talk to people. At the end of the day, I don't have to leave with a certain number of registrations, but we might have talked to 100 people,
That's
right?
right. That's
And
right.
so I think that's the main takeaway for me is that we need to talk to people more, right? We need to go out there and listen. I know it's a pandemic. I know people are scared. And I know we're doing this virtually right now as we speak. Like we're not in the studio hanging out like we used to be. But people need to get out of the house and off their computers and they need to get back into the neighborhoods. We do it safely. We can social distance. We wear masks. We have hand sanitizer. We wash our hands. But you can't do all this organizing on the phone and through text and through social media. Like you have to talk to people person to person.
Absolutely. That's always the best approach. And we're listening and we're talking to Vanessa Ria Graber, activist, journalist in Pennsylvania, really the two-state area, particularly in South Jersey as well. So the cannabis legalization is on the ballot in New
That's
Jersey. I
right.
know that's got a lot of our friends, a lot of our folks. I have a good, we've talked about it, but a Latino couple that is, trying to position themselves for a license if this goes through. So respect to them, cross our fingers. But what I did want to ask you before we go to our next break, Vanessa, is I guess if there's one thing, and then Tony, I'll get to your point, which was excellent in the comment section. But if there's one thing, and I have in the scroll for more information, votespa.com, that you want people to understand about the voting process in early vote, the voting centers. The voting centers can be very convenient options. So anything that you want to share with people quickly about, information and what you want to share about the voting process in PA this year?
Okay. I do it real quick, real simple. October 19th is the last day to register to vote. You can still register to vote. If you've changed your address recently, you have to register again, right? You got to do the whole change of address thing. You have to have an ID to vote, to register if you're a new registration. And when you go to the polls on election day, you have to bring that new ID. If you've been voting for a long time and you haven't changed your address or anything, you don't need a voter ID. But if you're someone who just turned 18 or you're just voting for the first time, you're a new registration, you need that ID at the polls. So you can look for your polling locations at philadelphiavotes.com. All right. You can search polling locations and Philadelphia, PA online. It'll come right up. So make sure you know where your polling location is. Make sure you have confirmation of your voter registration and make sure you bring that ID. For mail-in ballots, I believe the last day for mail-in ballots is like October
27th.
Yes. So with the mail-in ballots, couple of things, right? It does take a minute. So the earlier you do it, the better off you'll be in getting that ballot on time. So do it now. Go to votespa.com, fill out the ballot application. If you're a new voter and you also want to get a mail-in ballot, your best bet is to go to one of the early voting centers. And you can go to one. The one in North Philly that was bumping today, I went by. It was at 4th and Lehigh, Julio Burgos Elementary School.
And by the way, they're open every day. They're open Saturdays, they're open Sundays.
That's right.
That might be your best option. Get your butts down there to compra on a Saturday, and you don't
register there.
Shop, very convenient.
You can register. You can apply for the mail-in ballot, and they'll give you the mail-in ballot. So you can do all of it at once, and then you could drop off that mail-in ballot there. A lot of people have asked us about the Postal Service because they've heard the stories. They're concerned. So we tell people, if you don't want to send it through the mail, that's fine. Take it to one of the early voting centers, and you could drop it off directly. So I went there with my partner. He dropped it off, and he put it right in the thing. So we know that they got it. They check it for you. And then lastly, super important, and this is if you're in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, you have to put your mail-in ballot in 2 envelopes. There's an official ballot envelope that makes your ballot secret, and then you put it in the envelope that has the address and the postage on it. If it's not in both envelopes, they will not count it. So double, triple check that you've completed everything. A lot of people don't fill out the ballot questions. Flip it on the other side. Make sure you fill out those ballot questions. Go to 70.org in Philly if you have questions about the ballot questions, or Ballotpedia. Those are both good places to read what they actually mean. Crowdsource it. That's what I did. I didn't understand number 2.
There's a lot of good information out there, a lot of nonpartisan information between Votes BA, the Philadelphia website. If you live in Northeast Philadelphia, George Washington High School, a lot of our Latino and minority friends live in the Northeast. They're voting at GW. A lot of people are voting at Temple. We have a lot of friends that work at Temple, go to Temple, live in that area, work at the gas station down the block. A cousin of mine was like, "Hey, Ralph, I really can vote at Temple." He's an IT guy at Temple. He's like, I could really vote. He lives a block away from. He works right down the block from the Electoral Center. He works at Temple University. He didn't know, so he was like, "Oh, that's a great tip." So don't assume people know things.
2 quick things because they're also important. If your ballot arrives kind of late and you're like afraid that you're not going to get it in time, you can take it to the polls and they will invalidate it and they will let you vote in person. So if you get it too late and you don't feel like you can send it in, you could take it to the polls with you, or again, take it to the early voting center. Because again, if you feel like you don't trust the mail, it's not going to get there in time, drop it off at one of the official drop-off sites. And then secondly, there's another question we get all the time, especially the older people. If you throw away your ballot, you lose it, you damage it, your dog eats it, your kid takes it, you can apply for a second mail-in ballot. That's so right. Again, you could do that at the early voting center. Hold on, just hit us up at Philly Boricuas too, or in the comments if you have questions, and we'll try to help you out.
And by the way, I just got us, Vanessa, 200 backpacks for the kids for the 24th. So that's another conversation. So we're working
at Hunting Park tomorrow, Saturday, October 17th, from 11 to 3, doing the voter outreach. So come on by and get registered, get the information, and come hang out.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do here is I did want to, because my man Jesus always brings up these good points about financial empowerment. Ray, what about building access, growing wealth, credit, etc.? One of the things we need to do, Tony, is before the end of the year is really do a deep dive on housing and some of that topic, because the bulk of wealth building in minority communities, frankly, is through housing. And Vanessa spoke to it, that we're having a housing crisis in minority communities through gentrification, so just the rent's too high kind of dynamic all over the country. Many of our communities still haven't recovered from the economic decline of 2009 and 2008, which really was devastating. The most devastating element of that was the lack of Latino wealth through housing. So that's a topic that we need to talk about more, Tony. So I'm glad you brought that to the table. And of course, the executive producer of Bomba Live, please go vote. Christina's begging y'all. She is begging y'all. So what we're going to do, Vanessa, is real quick is before we bring on our very special guest, can you catch people up about the shameful, yet another chapter in Puerto Rican media history where La Comay has stuck their foot again, to the point where our legendary celebrities are calling on major media networks to stop playing their music?
Que escándalo, right? Here we go again with La Comay. We thought we got rid of them a few years ago after all their racist and homophobic nonsense. There was a huge public outcry. They got kicked off the air, but they came back. They came on the SBS, the Spanish Broadcasting Service, with a new show. But they're back to the same old antics. This time, Cobo was basically making fun of one of the gubernatorial candidates' children. There was a photo that was uploaded, and he sexualized the photo, especially of Lugaro, who is the candidate's daughter.
And the only female gubernatorial candidate.
Who is an independent candidate. And, there's this levels to this stuff, right? Because it's just misogyny, it's like pedophilia, it's like all types of,
it's just so disgusting,
wildly inappropriate stuff. And the thing that is like beneath the surface is that in Puerto Rico, there's been a series of murders of trans women and women, and there's been a international outcry from women in Latin America about femicides, right? About domestic violence, about the abuse that women are experiencing under patriarchal societies, and just the machismo, right, that affects us all. So the fact that this is a woman gubernatorial candidate and they, singled her out and did this to her children, the children are innocent here, no matter what, right?
The
So
child wasn't doing anything wrong. It's just a kid
no,
running around playing.
it's perverse, it's disgusting. And so that is why people are protesting. They're calling for a cancellation of the show. Bad Bunny is threatening to take his music off the stations. And people
Bad Bunny shouted this issue out on the Latin Billboard Awards last night and dedicated his honor as the top Latino artist to Latinas and, of course, women dealing with these issues all over the world, but particularly Puerto Rican women, transgender women on the island of Puerto Rico dealing with this. So this caused international headlines. And I want to remind people that we got rid of La Comay many years ago, particularly with this, just misogyny, but particularly the LGBT
the homophobic and
homophobia
content. It's just, they're always doing something. It's not, the thing that makes me upset, it doesn't represent us, right? This is not who we are as a people. There are some people in every society, right, that are gross and inappropriate and racist and horrible, but that's not representative of us. And this is why we do the work we do with media and with journalism and getting control of our own media. Like, look what happened when we started a station, right? We changed the content. We didn't have none of that inappropriate mess. We didn't tolerate racism or any of that stuff. And we need to hold these media companies accountable for the impact that their content has on our communities. And so Kobo needs to go, La Comay, they need to cancel all that stuff. And they need
immediately
to do an apology. And they also need to repair the damage that's been done.
Absolutely.
There's a real distrust of the media, especially in the United States, but in Puerto Rico as well. I mean, we saw how the media was kind of in cahoots with Governor Rosselló, right? They were defending him. They were not really supporting the protests. They were not really doing a lot to call out the transphobia and homophobia and the violent acts. So they need to do better. They need to be held accountable. And people need to keep fighting. We know what happens when Boricuas get out on the streets, right?
That's
so
right.
This ain't going to end here.
Especially the women that were in the LGBT community really fomented these movements over the last several years on the island, were really the leaders, essentially, in many ways, of the Ricky Renuncia movement and the subsequent movement to, we'll see. We have three major new party candidates that, whatever you want to think about them, are pretty strong. They're going to get a lot of support in this election in November in Puerto Rico. And a lot of that is based off not only pushing back on the corruption, but based off both major parties on the island not doing enough to support women and the LGBT community. And you're listening to Vanessa Villa Graver on Founder and Jason Bombalay. Before we get to Zulma Arzu Brown and her team that have a great new web series you want to learn more about, Dike, I want to call out the other person that's on the crawl here. So for people that don't know, Reverend Samuel Rodriguez is actually a Bethlehem Boricua. He's a Puerto Rican from Pennsylvania, born and raised, I don't know about born, but raised in Lehigh Valley. And for people that don't know, Reverend Rodriguez is probably one of the most prominent 2 or 3 Latino evangelical pastors in the United States. He has a mega church in California and is very well recognized in the evangelical community. And so Reverend Rodriguez, for whatever reason, and he, and for full disclosure, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I'm sure he does a lot of good spiritual work for people, but for whatever reason, really has tied his, has really been jockeying President Trump since he won. And so the first thing to raise my eyebrow about Reverend Rodriguez was after, if you recall, Vanessa, when AOC and that congressional delegation, particularly of women members of Congress, went to the border to observe the conditions, and they reported some horrific findings. Remember, they met women that were drinking out of toilets and just abusive, concentration camp type situation. Trump called him, and he proceeded to go down days later and took pictures and prayed, not with the children, not with the refugees that were being abused by the authority figures, but sat and took pictures and prayed with these scum ICE guys that go to work every day. And look, you can make your own decisions, but you go to work every day to torture children and torture people. And so, now we turn around and we all see on social media last few days that Reverend Rodriguez is going to be bringing Eric Trump to the middle of North Philadelphia, right in the center of the neighborhood that Vanessa does a lot of her great community work. And we just had to call it out because, look, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I know he literally has blood relatives in Philly that are pastors that we're all friends with. and it's all nice. But this is the bottom line. When you don't call out your nice people, look at Amy Coney Barrett, who's going to be on the Supreme Court. She's got 7 kids. I'm sure she's nice, but that nice lady is going to vote in that in the next ACA Supreme Court case to cut 20 million people off their health care. So that nice lady, so all y'all out there, my cancer warriors, my friends that have pre-existing conditions, that nice lady you see on TV and your friends are telling you, oh, she's Catholic, oh, she's nice. She has, like, look, she has 2 black kids. That nice person is going to cut 20 million people off their health care at least. That nice person is there on a mission to turn around. I have a brain fart, Vanessa. The abortion.
Roe versus Wade.
Roe versus Wade. I'm so sorry. That nice person, and I know that's a controversial issue in our community, but the bottom line is that if and whenever the turn, the only people going to jail are young black and brown women. And so that nice person is going to put y'all families in a position years from now where you're going to have to be doing GoFundMes for your daughters, because they'll be getting put in prison for having to make a very difficult decision in that atmosphere. So that these nice people like Reverend Rodriguez, like Amy Coney Barrett, they might be nice, they might be Christians, but they're doing harm at this moment to our community, and we have to call it out.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to 12 years of Catholic school. And my main takeaway, right, was like, speak out against injustice, help the sick and the poor, and treat everybody with love and respect. So if you use those 3 basic principles, right?
It's funny how that works, Vanessa, huh?
The Trumps don't meet the test. And we talk about courts and these cases, they have lots of tests, right? The criteria you have to meet if it's going to do X, Y, and Z. And so that's my test, right? So, Philly Boricuas is organizing a protest against Eric Trump, coming into North Philly to one of the ministries. And listen, this is not a...
There it is, Vanessa. There it is. Everyone can join you.
So this is not a protest against the church or against Christians. I just want to clarify that.
Oh, of course.
We are protesting Eric Trump and the policies and the values that they represent. And the reality is that Trump kicked off his campaign with racism against Latinos, and he has continued a policy after policy of hate, oppression, poverty. I mean, like, I just
worried about his own wife, his own son. They got COVID. He wasn't worried about it.
I mean, my question for them, right, is just this simple, right? Because this is the most horrific thing that I can think of, is how do you justify the Latino children in cages being treated like animals right now? It's happening right now.
Women getting hysterectomies, unwarranted.
Yeah, children getting sexually abused, living on the floor like animals. I mean, my dog is getting better treatment.
And
than
for what?
children.
I mean, for what? Like, so you can curry favor with these people? It's disgusting. Vanessa, we got to get to our next guest. We'll talk about it at the end of the show. I know we're both heated, and we definitely want to support you with tomorrow's counter protest. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a clip from a recent performance from a tremendous entertainer, Maria Isa, who's also a tremendous advocate for all these issues, who did a bomba in homage to our personal friend, George Floyd. Then we're going to be Zulma and the crew to talk about Tique, the new hot web series that we all have to support. Good afternoon, mi gente. This is Rafael Ray Collazo, not only the host of the Found Translation Talk Show, which you can hear and watch on WPPM every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, but also some would say a political professional, political operative. In my day job, I am the Director of National Political Affairs for Unidos U.S. Action Fund, which is the nation's largest Hispanic civil rights organization. Not too bad from a kid from North Philly that grew up across the street from Porky's Point. And you North Philly people know what I'm talking about. Again, thank you so much for joining WPPMLP 106.5 FM in the city of Philadelphia. And of course, for our tune-in listeners, you can be listening anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. The first half of the show you just heard was actually a segment on last week's show featuring one of my frequent contributors and the founder of the radio, co-founder of the radio program, Vanessa Maria Graber, where we really sort of broke down where we felt the race was sort of on a street level Vanessa's doing a lot of work to engage, and I am in a different way, to engage voters for this upcoming election, specifically in Pennsylvania. Vanessa on the ground with the work she's doing with Philly Boricuas and the work I'm doing with the New US Action Fund. We have made over 100,000 calls to Philadelphians that we have determined that, have an interest in the election, but need this valuable information because of all the different, because of the political and just civil environment and health environment because of the COVID-19 situation. So what I want to do in the second segment of this very special edition, sort of election 2020 WPPM special here with Ray Collazo, is I want to do two things. One is sort of get my Steve Kornacki on and give you all sort of a flavor of a little cheat sheet for you around what really you need to be looking out for on election day and sort of those subsequent days when we're going to still probably have some final determinations around states throughout the country because of the lag time that we anticipate because of the large amount of vote by mail balloting that's going to be utilized due to COVID-19 this year. And then I want to get into sort of a call to action and really my advice to many of you around what I feel all of you, even if you've already voted, and shout out to people that have already voted or are making their plan to vote before election day using these various options in Pennsylvania, what you need to do on election day, which I think is going to be very important and which is information I'm garnering from the thousands and thousands of phone calls that we're doing with voters in Philadelphia and the immediate area as it relates to this election. So what I'm going to do here is, let me just preface it by saying this. We're going to try this experiment with my producer, Sergio Galliano, much respect to Sergio here on the ones and twos, is that what I want to do is, well, first of all, I want to share you this. I was a little kid. I was like 5. I wanted to be an astronaut. Like a lot of kids. I don't know. Nowadays, I don't know. Astronauts aren't as, people don't know as much about astronauts. And in fact, I had an uncle, Lester Gonzalez, that as a college student interned at the space station in Houston, the Houston, I forget what they call it, but the NASA facility in Houston, I forget what they call it. Cape Canaveral is the one in Florida. And so he was an inspiration. He would send me pictures of astronauts, and the first Latino astronaut, Franklin Chang Diaz, autographed a picture for me when I was a wee lad. So that was my first hero, Franklin. Then I wanted to be Roberto Alomar. For those that don't know, Roberto Alomar is a Hall of Fame Major League Baseball player and possibly the greatest second baseman to ever play the game. Also Puerto Rican. Roberto Alomar did it all. Switch hitter, fantastic glove, had this athleticism. He could like jump and turn. And he did it all. He's clutch, got a couple rings. Then later on in life, I want to be George Lamont. George Lamont was a freestyle singer that was really cool. All the girls like George Lamont. He could do this thing with his hair. There was like a twist thing he could do, and I could never figure out how to do it with hairspray or gel. I'm real bad with that stuff, as you can tell. This is my COVID look here. I apologize. I've been doing too good the last few days, and haven't had a chance to get to it. So I'm going to chop it up. But now in my adult life, clearly the hero of the story is my man, Steve Kornacki. For those that don't know, Steve Kornacki is an NBC reporter who's the guy that does all the big board stuff. So in homage to my man, Steve, we're going to do a little experiment here where I'm going to actually show you in visual form what's going to be at stake, what are the states you need to look at, and what are the dynamics that are going to be in play that's going to determine ultimately this election, who wins not only the presidential, but we'll have a minute to touch base about the Senate piece and why one or two states in this whole situation are incredibly important. So I'm going to try to see here. Give me a second. I'm going to try to share the screen here. Appreciate y'all being patient with me. Okay. Let's see here. Let's do this. Sergio, how would I get it on the screen, my friend? There you go. Okay. Can you blow that up any bigger, Sergio? No, do it the other way. That's cool. There you go. Okay. Sergio, as long as folks can hear it, we could do it this way. Okay. So I know it might be a little small, and I obviously for our radio listeners, I'm going to have to sort of give you the play-by-play for this. But for people watching the show on StreamYard and on Facebook, we are looking at essentially the map of 2016. So in sort of blue and red, breaking down. So what I've done is, let's start with the map as if 2020 was a replay of 2016. So in 2016, I might have gotten one or two of the congressional districts wrong, but essentially Trump beat Clinton 305 to about 233, 234 in electoral college numbers. So really quickly, every state, depending on their population, is assigned a number of electoral votes. So, for example, Pennsylvania has 20, Florida has 29, Delaware has 3, and that's all based on population. So we don't do our presidential elections, unfortunately, by just total population, total vote. If that was the case, I don't think a Republican would have won an election in the last 30 years in this country nationally. And in fact, Hillary Clinton beat President Trump by about 3 million votes. I've been saying for the last several years that regardless of who the Democratic candidate was going to be, and in this case, I don't think anything changes. I expect one of the things you can pretty much bank is that Biden will beat Trump in the Electoral College, in the total raw vote, probably about 5, maybe upwards of 7 million votes. And I'm going to explain in a minute why I believe that. And I think statistically, that's as sure of thing as we know going into the race. So what we're looking at here is, again, for people watching on radio, is that we're actually looking at what the map would look like if things stayed the same. So 305 to 233. So that seems like, wow, Trump would have a big advantage, or Biden would have to do a lot to overcome the Electoral College. And again, you win Pennsylvania by a vote, you get all 20 electoral votes. You win Wisconsin by 50,000 votes, you just get the same 10 electoral votes. So they're all, with the exception of a couple funny states that do it by congressional district, it's all winner take all, every state. And because of the dynamics, there's only a certain amount of quote unquote swing elections out here. So 305 to 233 seems like a big mountain to climb for Biden. But I'm going to do one thing on the board here. I'm going to assume for a moment, what happens when you assume, but I'm just going to hypothetically change the results in 3 places. Only 3. And that would be the 3 you're hearing a lot about, that people are obsessed with, which is the upper Midwest. You want to say Pennsylvania's East Coast, that's fine. But essentially 3 industrial northern states that historically, because of their strong labor history, were very democratic states. But in the last, in the modern era, have become very swing states for lots of political and cultural reasons. And that's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And so even if nothing else changes, nothing changes in the South, nothing changes in the West, nothing changes anywhere else in the country, all the results from 16 stay the same. But those 3 states flip back to the Democrats, which is what the polling's suggesting, even though Pennsylvania, everyone knows there's a lot of dynamics of Pennsylvania. Biden wins. Biden would win in that scenario 279 to 259. So close. You need 270 to win. But if nothing else happens and those 3 states flip back to Democrats, Biden will win this election. Now, on the flip side of that, let's say so on the flip side of that, if Wisconsin and Michigan flip, but Pennsylvania stays with Trump, Trump wins a squeaker. He gets to 279. So obviously Pennsylvania is critically important. Now let's talk for a second about some of the states you're hearing a lot about. Okay. You're hearing a lot about Arizona, 11 electoral votes, basically the same as Wisconsin, which has 10. So Arizona, I do a lot of work in Arizona. Obviously, Arizona is very much sort of now following in the footsteps of 3 other Western states that even like 15, 20 years ago were red states or very purple toss-up states. States like, there was a time 20 years ago where New Mexico, for example, was a very competitive state. And it is in off-year election cycles. They've had Republican governors, for example. But in a presidential, because of the high Hispanic and Native American population, it's a very blue state. Colorado, 12 years ago, was a state that was impressive for Obama to win. Now, you're not hearing much about Colorado because it's assumed that that's going to be a very blue state. Nevada, a state that, again, had a Republican governor till a few years ago, had Republican senators, was considered a very toss-up-y kind of state because of the organizing that's taken place, the investment of, frankly, in Latino voters, in workers. It's a state that, unlike in a lot of other places, still is organized around labor unions. And in a lot of these southern states, you're finding that's a factor why we aren't as successful organizing people, because we don't have those kind of systems in place like labor unions or other kind of advocacy institutions where we can mobilize people, working people around elections and advocacy projects. So let's say, for example, Arizona now demographically starting to reflect their brother and sister states in the Southwest. Increasingly, large Latino populations, and now are becoming more urban pockets. So if you know Arizona, Phoenix and Maricopa counties, like, I think it's now almost 60% of the total population of the state. So Arizona now, and the other piece that's important about Arizona is because of the anti-immigration and anti-Latino political environment that's been there or had been there for many years because of Sheriff Arpaio, that, this is really kind of the culmination of probably over 10 years of organizing that's taken place, that's resulted in the election of new young elected officials, more Latinos engaged in politics. And there's a lot going on politically outside of the presidential election on the state house level. I have a good friend of mine, Francisco Montoya, running for city council. And there's just a lot of organizing taking place, and an understanding from especially young people that they have a stake in the political process. In the Southwest, environmental organizing, for example, is very, has a real strong foothold in communities like this. So Arizona is sort of like the last domino to fall between the foursome of New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada, Arizona. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, Arizona, which the polling is suggesting, goes for Biden. Okay, so in that scenario, even if Trump were to win Pennsylvania, but Arizona flipped, you could be at 270 to 269, which would not be ideal. That would be crazy. That would be pretty stressful. But there is a scenario where Trump could win Pennsylvania, and still lose a very tight election with a state like Arizona flipping. Another state that I'm looking at is North Carolina, 15 electoral votes. North Carolina, even though usually it's a red state, Obama did win it in 2008. The Democrats haven't won it since. They have a Democratic governor. And Trump only won the state in 2016 by 3.5 percentage points. So North Carolina has a much more cosmopolitan demographic than Alabama or a Tennessee or a Mississippi or even a South Carolina. You've got two major urban centers, Charlotte and the Raleigh-Durham area. You have a lot of, like in Virginia, a lot of East Coast people moving down there for economic opportunities in the banking industry in Charlotte and other industries throughout the state. You've got people that move there for the military. And it's a growing, diverse state. It obviously has a large traditional African-American population. Reverend Barber is, kind of a very visible symbol of that. One of the great working organizers for working people, and a growing Latino population. Give you a little fun fact that over 100,000 Puerto Ricans have moved to North Carolina since Hurricane Maria. It was actually one of the biggest destinations for climate change refugees post Hurricane Maria. So, North Carolina, we're seeing in the polling, Biden and the Senate candidate are doing quite well. So that's another state, particularly since that's going to be called pretty early, and they have a lot of infrastructure around counting ballots, and so we're going to know about North Carolina election night. And there's many other states that are sort of on the map. So let's even say hypothetically, again, Trump gets Pennsylvania, but Wisconsin and Michigan and even wins Wisconsin, just saying hypothetically. So that's still, if you gave them, even if a state like North Carolina flips, and even like a Georgia, because Georgia, again, is very close. Biden could squeak it out. So, and I do want to talk about Georgia for a second, because Georgia, to me, is going to, I think, going to be the tipping point state in this whole situation. And I say this for many reasons. One is that Georgia, very similar to North Carolina, and to some degree, like in Arizona, even though the vibe is a little different, is changing very rapidly. So again, we're in the same way we're seeing Arizona sort of be the last domino potentially to fall in the West. Georgia and North Carolina are dominoes that could fall in the same way, the way Virginia has changed demographically over the last several years. And so a lot of that is happening for several reasons. One is great demographic change. Again, very similar to North Carolina. East Coast Northerners moving down there, people from all over the country moving down there for various business opportunities. It's become a hub for the Black professional class all over the country. And it has a rapidly growing diverse population of not only Latinos in the Latinx community, but the API community, Asian American Pacific Islander population. So the demographics are changing quickly. Another dynamic is Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams, for people that don't know, was I believe, the minority leader of the state legislature. So she had a leadership role in Georgia state politics, ran for governor in 2018, did a fantastic job, and lost a very close election to the person who actually was the Secretary of State, Dunn, I believe his name is. He did a lot of work with his day job to suppress Black voters and people that would most likely vote for the Democratic option. And so, out of that terrible case of voter suppression has come a renewed movement and commitment in Georgia from people like Stacey, excuse me, people like Stacey Abrams and others to defend and continue to mobilize the vote. So, excuse me. So this is sort of a continuation of really like a 3-4 year movement that's going on in Georgia to push back on voter suppression issues. So not only is Georgia critically important because, as you've seen in the polling, it's basically a toss-up state at this point. 16 electoral votes on the line. So basically could potentially be part of canceling out even a Pennsylvania if it were to stay in Trump's column, but also really represents sort of where this battle for our country's democracy is in our society. Are we going to be a country where we're really going to be a democracy and we're going to fight for our ideas and we're going to work, or are we going to be a apartheid or some sort of hybrid, dictatorship, because our votes or some people's votes really don't matter. And so that is a process that we're sort of in the process of deteriorating to now as a country, frankly. And this election is going to be is really going to speak to the direction of our country as a democracy as much as the direction of our country politically as anything. Georgia is also very important because it has 2 Senate races going on, one of which, the Perdue-Ossoff race. If you saw that Senator Perdue mocked vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris's name during a rally where he was introducing President Trump. Obviously, dog whistles, a lot of racial animus there. And again, it speaks to this cultural battle we're having around, what is our country going to look like? Are we having conversations around our political ideas, or are we battling so our tribe can maintain power at all costs? And so again, thank you. We really appreciate you watching and listening to WPPM LP's 106.5 FM's ongoing election 2020 coverage. This is your host, Ray Collazo. By night, I'm the host of the Found Translation talk show here at WPPM, and by day, I'm the national political director for political affairs for Unidos U.S. Action Fund, the nation's largest Latino civil rights organization, and a Philly kid through and through. The last thing I want to talk about, so I appreciate you indulging me. Obviously, those are the kind of states. I mean, we didn't get a chance to even get into Iowa or some of the other swing states you're going to want to keep your eye on. But the bottom line is that Pennsylvania is going to be critically important, and is really going to be able to Pennsylvania and Florida, kind of the way they go, could either make this a pretty obvious result, or could keep us up at night for several days as some of the high volume vote by mail states ballots come in several days after election day 2018. They didn't declare the Senate race in Arizona till about 6 days later. So, and Arizona could literally decide this whole thing at the end of the day. So so get your popcorn on and get your patience on for the last few minutes of the show. And we appreciate everyone watching and listening to this program, our ongoing election coverage. Is I wanted to mention that in the conversations we're having with voters in Philadelphia, there's a dynamic that's coming up, particularly for those, I would say, 50 and above, which is they're very interested in voting. They're not scared of, they have concerns, but they're willing to go vote in person despite their concerns around COVID. But they want to vote on election day. They don't want to deal with any of these voting centers or mail ballots or anything like that. So I think it's incumbent on everyone that I wanted to share with you in these last few minutes is that make your plan to make sure you vote early. If you already haven't, get that out the way, because on election day, you're going to have to need to help your older relatives go vote, whether it's giving them a ride or just keeping them company in a long line, whether it's making sure they go to the right polling place. Only about 80% of the polling places Philadelphia normally uses are going to be utilized. There's going to be consolidation at the polls of polling sites. So it's important for you to maybe do that research, help your family members that culturally just want to vote on election day, help them not only make their plan to vote, but help them vote, stand in line with them. We don't know how long these lines are going to be on election day. Make sure they get to where they have to go. If they need language assistance, give them that, provide that service for your loved ones. It is going to be a crazy day out there. We're going to get Proud Boys. We're going to get nuts. We're going to get guys driving around with, with Confederate flags on pickup trucks, circling around our neighborhoods. There's going to be a lot of craziness out in the community in Philadelphia and throughout the state on election day. And it's incumbent on us to make a plan to get our voting out the way so that we can help people that are going to vote on election day. And that's the vibe I'm getting. And we're talking again to thousands and thousands of people on a daily basis. And don't be surprised if a big part of our population, particularly those 50 and above, are going to vote on election day. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's important. It's incumbent on us to assist our brothers and sisters, our family members, our mothers, our grandparents, our loved ones, get out there and not only vote, but vote safely. COVID is a factor. And so we want to make sure that you're assisting them and making sure that they feel they can vote safely in this environment. And again, I really want to thank everyone for watching and listening to this ongoing 2020 coverage here that we have at WPPMLP 106.5 FM. I guess the last thing I want to say is, one of the things that we're really gonna need to focus on after this election is the vaccine, and how do we organize together so that people have access to a vaccine they can trust, that it's distributed equitably, and and it's free or extremely affordable. And so, I think about this Supreme Court case coming up November 10th, which could dismantle the ACA, and what could be the ramifications of having no Affordable Care Act legislation, millions more of us losing our health care, and then trying to navigate the the vaccine distribution process. So these elections mean something. These elections have consequences. But beyond voting, we have to all work together, because regardless of who wins and loses in 2 weeks, that's going to be a real issue that we're going to have to work together and advocate for. And again, so November 3rd, make your plan, fam, to vote before November 3rd, because on November 3rd, you're going to need to help loved ones who are stuck in their old ways. I want to vote on election day. It's what they've been doing forever. To not only make sure they go to the right location, they're prepared to wait potentially longer than they normally would normally wait, and that they're able to vote in a manner that's healthy and COVID, with the COVID guidelines, so that they can vote in a way that's healthy and happy. Sergio, do we have any more time, or should I wrap this up? I think we're done, but I just want to make sure we're done. Awesome. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for my producer, Sergio Galliano, repping the 954. And what a cool cell phone to have. And I always appreciate our WPPM LP 106.5 family for including me in these conversations around election 2020. Have a wonderful day, folks. Make your plan to vote and help your loved ones on election day. Peace.